Melbourne Flight Service received the call at 7 minutes past 7 on a Saturday evening. A young pilot, 20 years old, was asking about traffic in his area. He said there was a large aircraft below the clouds, moving at high speed. Melbourne checked. There was no traffic anywhere near him. The pilot's name was Frederick Valentich. He was flying a single-engine Cessna 182 over the Bass Strait, the stretch of water between mainland Australia and Tasmania. It was October 21, 1978. The weather was calm. Visibility was clear. It should have been a routine flight. It was not. Over the next 6 minutes, Valentich described something no one on the ground could see. Something with 4 bright lights. Something metallic and shining. Something that was not behaving like any aircraft he had ever encountered. And then his radio went silent. Frederick Valentich was never seen again. What makes this case impossible to dismiss is that we have the audio. Not a second-hand account. Not a written report filed days later. We have Valentich's own voice, recorded in real time, as whatever happened to him was happening. At 19 minutes past 7, Valentich radioed Melbourne again. The object, he said, had 4 bright landing lights. It was approaching him from the east. Melbourne asked him to confirm the type of aircraft. He could not. It was moving too fast. He estimated it passed roughly 1,000 feet above him. Then it vanished. Valentich told Melbourne the object had passed over him and disappeared. But less than a minute later, it was back. He reported it was approaching from the southwest. Melbourne asked if he could describe it. He said it was long, with a shape he could not identify, and a green light on its exterior. It was moving at a speed he said he could not estimate. What happened next is where the transcript shifts from strange to deeply unsettling. Valentich reported the object was orbiting above him. Not flying past. Not maintaining a heading. Orbiting. Circling him in the sky, as if observing. He said the other pilot seemed to be playing some kind of game with him. Melbourne asked if he could confirm what he was seeing. Was it a military aircraft? Was it commercial? Valentich said no. He said it was not any aircraft he recognized. His engine then began to rough idle. He reported losing power. Melbourne asked him to state his intentions. He said he was going to proceed to King Island. Then he said something that has haunted investigators for almost 50 years. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft. Those were the last coherent words Frederick Valentich ever spoke. What followed was 17 seconds of open microphone. On the recording, you can hear a metallic, scraping sound. Then nothing. The channel went dead. No distress call. No mayday. Just silence. A massive search began immediately. The Royal Australian Air Force deployed a Lockheed P-3 Orion surveillance aircraft. 8 civilian planes joined the effort. Ships already in the Bass Strait were rerouted to the search area, which eventually covered over 2,600 square kilometers of ocean. They found nothing. Not a piece of wreckage. Not an oil slick. Not a single trace of the aircraft or its pilot. The search was called off after 4 days. To understand why this case became one of Australia's most enduring mysteries, you have to understand who Frederick Valentich was. He was born in June 1958 in Melbourne, the son of Italian immigrants. His father Guido would later describe him as quiet, serious, and obsessed with 2 things, flying and unidentified flying objects. Frederick had wanted to join the Royal Australian Air Force. He applied twice. He was rejected both times for insufficient educational qualifications. He turned instead to civilian aviation and enrolled in a course for his commercial pilot's license, which he failed on his first 2 attempts. At the time of his disappearance, he held a Class 4 instrument rating, which permitted him to fly at night, but only in clear weather with visual reference to the horizon. His logbook showed roughly 150 hours of flying time. He had been reprimanded twice during training, once for flying into a restricted zone over Sydney and once for deliberately flying into a cloud. He was not an experienced pilot. He was not a reckless one either. He was somewhere in between, still learning, still building confidence, still trying to prove himself in the sky. His father revealed something else after the disappearance. Frederick, he said, was an ardent believer in UFOs. He had spoken about them often. He had expressed concern about being attacked by one. Some sources report that just days before his final flight, he told his girlfriend he was afraid of being abducted by aliens. Whether those conversations were real or were shaped by hindsight is impossible to know. On the evening of October 21, Frederick Valentich filed a flight plan at Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne. He told officials he was flying to King Island to pick up for friends. He took 4 life jackets with him. Investigators later found no evidence that anyone was waiting for him on King Island. No friends had arranged a pickup. No one was expecting him. He also did not arrange for the runway lights at King Island Airport to be switched on. If he was genuinely planning to land there after dark, this was an extraordinary omission. You cannot land a light aircraft on an unlit runway at night. The official investigation could not explain why he was making the flight at all. He took off at 18 minutes past 6 with a full tank of fuel, enough for roughly 5 hours of flight. The weather was calm. The sky was clear. He climbed to around 5,000 feet and flew south toward Cape Otway, maintaining radio contact with Melbourne flight service the entire way. Everything was normal until it was not. The Department of Transport investigated. They reviewed the radio transcript. They examined weather data, radar records, and civilian reports. They collected scattered accounts from people along the coast who said they saw unusual lights in the sky that evening. One witness near Cape Otway described a green light moving erratically across the sky. Another described a bright object that appeared to hover before accelerating away. None of these accounts could be independently verified. None of them matched radar data. The investigation concluded that the reason for the disappearance was unknown and that it was presumed fatal for the pilot. 5 years later, in 1983, an engine cowl flap washed ashore on Flinders Island, roughly 70 kilometers northeast of where Valentich was last tracked. The Bureau of Air Safety Investigation examined the part and confirmed it came from the same type of aircraft Valentich had been flying, a Cessna 182. The serial numbers were within the range that matched his specific plane. This was the only physical evidence ever recovered. No other wreckage has been found. No body. No cockpit instruments. No personal belongings. A single engine cowl flap, 5 years later, on a beach. That is all the ocean has given back. The theories about what happened have never reached a consensus. The simplest explanation is pilot disorientation. The Bass Strait at dusk can disorient even experienced aviators. The horizon disappears. Water and sky merge. Reflections from stars or from the aircraft's own lights can create the illusion of objects that are not there. A pilot who becomes spatially disoriented may not realize they are descending. They may believe they are level when they are in a gentle spiral toward the water. Valentich had limited instrument flying experience. He may have seen his own lights reflected off the water and believed something was following him. Others point to mechanical failure. The Cessna 182 is a reliable aircraft, but no machine is immune to sudden malfunction. An engine failure over the Bass Strait at night would leave almost no time to react. The water temperature would make survival in the strait unlikely. Some investigators have suggested the disappearance was staged. They point to the inconsistencies in his flight plan. The friends who were not waiting. The runway lights he did not request. The fuel load that could have taken him far beyond King Island, perhaps to a remote landing strip. Perhaps somewhere he could start a new life. But no evidence of Valentich living under another identity has ever been found. His family insisted he had no reason to disappear. His bank accounts were untouched. And then there is the theory that Frederick Valentich encountered something genuinely unknown. The UFO explanation has been dismissed by aviation authorities, but it has never been fully explained away. The radio transcript is not the account of a panicking pilot imagining things. He was calm. He was specific. He described an object with 4 lights, a metallic surface, and a green glow. He described it hovering. He described it orbiting. He said clearly, twice, that it was not an aircraft. In 2014, a Victorian UFO research group claimed to have found a witness, a farmer who said that the morning after Valentich disappeared, he saw a 30-meter aircraft hovering over his property. He said Valentich's Cessna was attached to its underside, leaking oil. The group never confirmed the farmer's identity. He has never been found. The Australian government has not reopened the case. The official position remains that the reason for the disappearance of Frederick Valentich is unknown. What we know for certain is this. A 20-year-old pilot took off from Melbourne on a calm evening with a full tank of fuel. For 6 minutes, he described something in the sky that should not have been there. His engine failed. He said the words, "It's not an aircraft." 17 seconds of metallic scraping filled the radio. Then silence. Almost 50 years later, the only thing the sea returned was a single piece of metal from the engine cowling. If you found this story unsettling, you might want to hear about the Mary Celeste, a ship found sailing itself across the Atlantic with its entire crew gone. That episode is on the channel now. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. I cover the cases the world forgot.